Hello there, welcome to my channel. My name is Doug and I'm back with another Pen Resurrection Sunday video. I've done several of these Parker 51 Aerometric to cartridge conversions now, and they sell immediately. They're very popular. But I also got some negative comments asking why I'm just repeating the same resurrection over and over. Well, my first response is that the pens are selling. And they are selling even before the video goes public on a Sunday. That's because members of my channel will see my videos up to a week in advance before everyone else. If you want to get first dibs on any pen that I've restored and put up for sale, just join as a member of my channel. It's only 99 cents a month. My second response is that every pen is different, and I find different challenges with each pen, even though the model and the conversion is the same. I've got 5 more of these converters and at least a couple more Parker 51 Aerometrics on the way. So let me know in the comments below if you'd rather not see future conversions as videos. To be honest, it is easier to convert the pen without all the video editing and commentary. I could just restore and convert the pen and put pictures on my Wix page for sale when they are done. I'm expecting 2 more Parker 51 Aerometrics to be delivered next week, but you probably won't see videos on them anytime soon because I'm spending the next 3 weeks working on these gorgeous late 1930s Parker Vacuumatics. This one's actually mid-1940s, but these two are late 1930s, like 38 and 1940. All 3 will be on sale once they are restored over the next month, just in time for the lucrative gift-giving season. But let's take a look at the latest Parker 51 Aerometric ready for resurrection and conversion. Again, please excuse the background noise of my 3 humidifiers going full blast. We got over a foot of new snow yesterday, and it's minus 15 degrees Celsius outside right now, so my solid wood guitars require a lot of humidification. You'll just have to deal with it. So this is a 1950 Parker 51 Aerometric made in the USA. In 1950, they were still putting imprints on the top of the barrel, faintly visible, but it says made in the USA and 50 for 50. There's lots of minor wear and micro scratches throughout the entire barrel and hood, but it's not discolored at all. And this color from 1950 was called teal. And we take a look at the nib. It looks like a fine nib, and it looks like it's in relatively good shape. There's the ebonite feed, looks pretty good. Let's take a look at the cap. Cap is lustraloy, has Parker on the front and nothing on the back. Lots of micro abrasions from years and years of use. There's a small score across the chrome there where the clip was deflected. The top finial is in excellent shape and there's no corrosion. Take the barrel off and we see the Aerometric converter, and this is one of the early ones. It says Parker 51 to fill press ribbed bar firmly 4 times. Use dry writing superchrome ink. Holding point down, wipe point with soft tissue. The Parker Pen Company, made in the USA. That's a lot of information they put on that Aerometric filler. And there's the ribbed bar and the sack. The plyglass sack on the inside is just black, not transparent at all. It does suck up ink, so it's actually in working condition. Now I've previously already heated this hood off so I can remove the hood, and there we have the collector. First thing I do is put this in the ultrasonic cleaner for a few minutes in some pen flush, which is 9 parts distilled water and 1 part ammonia, and you see that came up fairly clean. We're going to take this collector, feed and nib off of this Aerometric filler, and we see the silver breather tube, which we're going to cut for use in the adapter. Now we do need, from the Aerometric filler, we do need the clutch ring and that O-ring right there. So I'm going to remove that O-ring, just like removing a tire, and we want to save that. Don't lose that O-ring. We take the clutch ring off, and the clutch ring is going to go on the converter, and the O-ring goes on after. And that's all ready to go once we've converted the pen. To convert the pen, we simply put the collector, nib, feed, and breather tube into the brass converter, and we push it down all the way, and I use a marker and mark off where the end of that brass tube meets up with the breather tube, like that. Then we take the collector, nib, feed, and breather tube back out again, and we measure 11 millimeters from that mark back and make another mark. And that will keep that breather tube just below that piercing tube, so it doesn't come into contact with the cartridge, just recessed by a couple of millimeters. So we're going to measure back until we get to 11 millimeters, just like that, and we make another mark right there. Then I'll take my Dremel tool and I'll cut that breather tube off right there. And there's the tube cut off with my Dremel. You can see that it's got some flashing on it, and the hole is a little bit obstructed, so I'm going to use a pin here just to clear out any of that metal flashing, and also make sure that tube is unobstructed by any ink. And then I'm just going to file down the edges a little bit from all that flashing on some 400 grit sandpaper, just to round off those edges to make them smooth. All good. Now we can put the collector back in the converter, push it down tight, and take a look to see that it's just a little bit proud of that, I think. Yeah, I think I have to take off a little bit. There, I just ground off a little bit more, file off the edges, check it with the pin. There, that's good. So I can put it back in and we'll check it again. Yeah, it's just slightly below that brass. So a Parker cartridge, when you push it in, will break the seal with the brass rather than with the breather tube. Yeah, that works nicely. I'm going to pull it back out again, and we're going to pull that nib and feed out. Take a look at the nib, polish up the nib and the feed. There we go. There's the nib, and the feed comes out. So I'm going to polish that little bit of ebonite up right there because that's visible. And there's our nib. And it has Parker made in USA. I can hardly see that. The A of the USA is cut off, and so is half of the O in 1950. And this side says RU for the ruthenium tip. I'm going to look at that nib carefully. Looks to be fairly well aligned, but I'm going to put these parts back in the pen flush ultrasonic bath and get them nice and clean, and then we'll polish up that nib. So here they are out of the bath. The nib is already looking a little bit better. Needs to be polished some more. Collector is nice and clean, and that feed is nice and clean as well. And I put my syringe on it and shot some water through that little breather hole, and it came out here. So this is all nice and clear. We'll polish that up. First, the nib on my jeweler's cloth. One of the little tricks I like to do is to cut the cotton bud off of a cotton swab. I'll cut some of it off anyway, so that it will fit inside here. Fits inside the nib, and then I give it a little bit of a bend like that, and then it makes it easier to polish the nib. Just a couple of seconds, and look what happens. Amazing. This is the only part that shows right here, but I like to have the whole thing nice and shiny. There we go. Just like brand spanking new. Now I put a little Meguiar's swirl remover 2 on a shop cloth. Very carefully polish up just that bottom section of the ebonite feed. These silver breather tubes can be very, very brittle, and so you have to be very, very careful with them. You don't snap it off. There's also a tiny little hole right there that is required to keep it being an aerometric. Just make sure that that is unobstructed as well. And that's already looking nice and shiny. I'll do it some more, but that ebonite is also fairly brittle, so don't put too much pressure on it. Support it on the top with your finger so you don't snap it off. This is 75-year-old ebonite after all. There, nice and shiny. Now this whole thing is going back in the pen flush ultrasonic bath to get any of that polishing compound off it. There, now we can put the feed, the nib, and the collector together and put it into the converter, and then we can test the pen. That feed right there. Interesting, at the factory this slot was cut slightly off angle, and that's why it cut off part of the USA and part of the 50, the 0 in the 50. But that slot right there lines up with the large channel on the collector. There's a narrow channel on the top and a large channel on the bottom. We line it up and it goes as far as it will, seated firmly and aligned. We put that whole kit and caboodle into the converter, and then we can put the hood back on. And of course it will be facing the wrong way, so I'm tightening that down. And I'm going to put my thumb right here pointing to the end of the hood. And you see that the nib is slightly off, and so I'm going to keep my thumb there to register where that needs to be. It's even better just to take my X-Acto blade and make a small, not on the threads, but on the brass right here, just make a small scratch. And that is where that nib should align. So I'll take this hood back off again and line up that scratch that I've made and turn the collector and nib assembly around so that they line up. That looks pretty good. And we can make micro adjustments as we go here. Lock that down. Yeah, it's a little bit too far, just a touch too far. There, perfect. I can put the barrel back on, and we have a converted Parker 51 Aerometric. So now all I have to do is polish up this barrel and hood with some micro mesh and polishing compound, and then buff up this lustraloy cap. The thing about the lustraloy is that this matte finish is sandblasted, and so any polishing you do will polish out that sandblasting, and the only way to get the matte finish back again is to sandblast it. Well, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to polish this up with some metal polish and see how many of these abrasions I can get out and keep some of the matte surface. Anyway, that clip is in really, really good shape. But before I start polishing, I'm going to do an ink nib test with this pen. So now I want to fill this pen and give it a test. And instead of using a cartridge, I want to use a converter. Now I'm not going to use a Parker converter. I've got a Pen BBS parts bag here. These are about $8 when you get them from Pen BBS on Etsy, and it comes with a Pen BBS converter, which fits the Parker 51 perfectly. Look at that. And so, dial that down, grab some Watermans. Now, because this is a cartridge converter, you can use any ink you want. You don't have to use a gentle ink like Waterman's Serenity Blue, but I would avoid any inks that have shimmering in them or particulates or are heavily saturated, because that collector can gunk up pretty easily. So I'm doing it a couple of times here. This is a 1950 Parker 51 Aerometric, and it indeed has a fine 14 karat gold nib. I'll run a little ink through that nib there just to get that collector full. And we got scratching going on side to side, so I need to do some alignment on that nib. Okay, so I have gone through some micro mesh with this and smoothed it out. It was slightly misaligned, but mostly it was like a burr on the underside of that nib. It's very smooth right now, but not as wet as I would like it to be. So I'm going to use some of my feeler gauges here to spread those tines out a little bit to make it a little bit wetter. There, I flossed the nib with some 0.003 inch or 0.076 millimeter feeler gauge, and it's a lot wetter now. So I've polished up the barrel and the hood, and they've come up very, very nicely, like brand new. But I've got a bit of an issue in that there's a small crack right there. Therefore, I'm going to seal those threads with some shellac and seal the nib down. I've already polished up the nib and got it writing perfectly now. It took quite a bit of adjustment. There was a small burr on one tine. One tine was actually a little bit pitted. I had to get my microscope out to see that. But I polished it using a whole bunch of micro mesh from 6,000 grit onto 12,000 grit. And I've got it writing beautifully now. And I spread those tines out a bit more as well to get more ink flow. So now I'm thinking that what I want to do is I'm going to seal that plastic to those threads right there with some shellac. That should seal the hood from any ink leakage. Get out my shellacker pen from the inky nib, and a little bit of shellac charge here, and I'm going to try to just paint those top threads and not touch that O-ring. There, now we're going to screw down the hood. There, so that's nice and tight and aligned, and I'm going to let that dry for a while before I even test it. Now I'm going to go after the cap. And there we are after some buffing and polishing. Some of that matte surface is now a lot shinier than it was, but it looks very new. I like it. And there's the pen. I'm going to use this for a bit to make sure that there's no leaks and that it's writing well. And then I'll come back and do a writing sample and my final thoughts. So what are my thoughts about this resurrection? As I said in the introduction, every pen is different. I've learned not to take any pen resurrection for granted. It might look like an easy fix, but that's when it jumps up and bites you in your ego. I thought there might be two curves that this pen might throw at me. One would be the nib, which turned out to be a bit more difficult to fix than I had expected. It had a bit of a hangnail, I think. The tines were aligned, but there was a raised edge on the bottom of one of them. This didn't make sense to me. It couldn't have been made like that. So when I got out my USB microscope, it showed me that the one tine was pitted, like it had been damaged somehow or dropped or something. Let me see if I can draw it for you. Edge on, here's the side of the nib, and then there's the tipping material that bulbs out like that. So this would be the top of the nib, and this is the bottom of the tipping material. When you looked right on sideways, the one side was more pronounced than the other, making this edge right here very sharp. And this was unusual because that blob of iridium or whatever it is put on the end of those tines and then it's cut afterwards. So they should be exactly equal. But this one was damaged and pitted. So basically what I did was I went through the routine I use for baby's bottom, going through the micro mesh from 3200 to 12,000. You can see a short video on that process by clicking right up here. But then while I was polishing the shell, I noticed there was a small hairline crack right at the threads. So I've sealed the crack by putting shellac on the threads, which should seal it against leaks. So far so good. I've been using this pen every day for a week now, and it's showing no signs of leaking whatsoever. And the nib is now gloriously smooth and wet. This is now one of the smoothest and wettest and nicest Parker 51 nibs I've ever used. So I'm offering this converted Parker 51 for sale for $120 US plus $20 shipping. If you're interested, email me at inkquiringminds@gmail.com, not on my Wix page, as I don't get to that often. And I'll give you instructions on purchasing the pen using PayPal. And if you miss out on this pen, there are some others coming. As I mentioned before, I've got a couple in the mail on my way to me. But just today I picked up these two Parker 51 sets in the original cases. Let's look at this one first. Give you a little sneak preview of what's coming in Pen Resurrection Sunday. This is a Parker 51 set from, I'm guessing, the early 50s. There's no date code on the fountain pen, but you'll notice that it's almost identical to the one I just resurrected. Same color, same teal color. And this one has a challenge to it. There was a tag on it that said, as found. And if we look carefully at the barrel, right there where he's marked it, there is a crack. But while polishing this barrel back up again, I'll get all kinds of that plastic dust, which I'm going to try to CA glue into that crack to stabilize it. Because this is an Aerometric and is going to be a converted Aerometric pen, that barrel doesn't seal any ink. So it's not a leak problem, it's a stabilization problem. So we'll see how well I can repair that crack. The rest of the pen looks very, very nice, and the pencil seems to be in some good shape as well. Same color, lovely set in the original Parker 51 box. And so this looks to me like a 1950 era Aerometric. This one in this beautiful oxblood burgundy color case looks like it's a little bit later, but the tag on this one said that these were new old stock, never been used. The only issue with these are that someone has tried to erase some initials that are in there in the barrel. But the rest of the pen looks like it's never been inked. Of course, I want to convert this anyway, so we won't care about that Aerometric filler, but the nib looks wonderful and thick. Other than that abrasion, the body and the cap are in pristine condition, and this is a bit of an odd duck. I thought this was a pencil, but it is a pen. So it looks like a jotter from the front, and the ballpoint nib isn't Parker. When you take the cap off, it has a pencil rear end, which I think is really odd. And when you unscrew it, there's that refill that someone put in it that doesn't belong in this pen. So either this is a pencil without any of the guts of the pencil, or this is a pen configuration that Parker put out that has an eraser on the end of it. There are no leads in there. If any of you ink-acquiring minds out there know what this might be, please leave a note in the comments below and tell me what you think this might be. But that's something to look forward to as a resurrection as well. Fountain pen and pen or pencil, whatever it might be, set, new old stock. And there you have it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. And you can join as a member of my channel for only 99 cents a month, and I guarantee I'll answer your comments in the comments section, and you'll get cool emojis, badges, sneak peek unboxing videos, as well as instant access to my videos the moment I post them. And that just leaves it for me to say, thank you for watching. And that's all she wrote.
I made this.